I'd now like to turn to Rachel West, who is going to speak for the International Prostitutes Collective, that is both the English Collective of Prostitutes and the US Prostitutes Collective. And in fact, it's very good because Rachel used to live here and has now lived in the US for a long time. So she really is from both countries. Rachel.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here and hearing all the fantastic speakers and panels. And I wanted to just start by saying a bit about the International Prostitutes Collective, which includes women working the streets, women working in massage parlors, women working in webcam, strippers, women working in different areas. And we're also an international, and we're multiracial, and we have women in the global south, and we're campaigning for the decriminalization of prostitution, for welfare, for higher wages and resources, so that no one is forced into prostitution through poverty. I wanted to share some struggles we've been involved in, and some which have ended in victory in spite of the tremendous injustice. And this is in a climate of increasing and punitive and repressive times that we live in. Us Pros, which we call our group US Prostitutes Collective, took part in an initiative recently where we found out about a regulation, like a rule, that's part of the victim compensation program in California, where you can get financial help for violent crimes if you've been a victim. And we found out because a young woman came to us who'd been brutally raped. She was almost killed. And when she went for compensation, she was denied because the police suspected her of being a prostitute. We decided to take up this fight, and we thought that because one group of women is singled out and discriminated against, that was really unfair and discriminatory, and we were going to change that rule. While we were fighting for sex workers, we were also fighting for all the other women who are also discriminated and excluded from the program, particularly like women coming out of prison were also denied compensation. So we began lobbying and pressing the Victim Compensation Board to hear our side of the story, and we won a number of public hearings where we went up and spoke to the Victim Compensation Board and brought testimony, incredible testimony, women speaking about the brutality, the rapes, what happened to them, and then how they were denied compensation. And we also reached out to other people across California, different groups, and we found that there was widespread support for our position, and people generally didn't think that sex workers should be treated in this way and discriminated against. So that we ended up getting support from church groups, from women's groups, legal groups, civil liberties groups, who came on board and were ready to back us. After a 12-month campaign, we won the repeal of the regulation. And when we were in the room with the press, one of the politicians, high-level politicians on this board, she said, "I find this regulation repulsive." And we said, well, why is it still on the books? So I also just wanted to, and we also made gains for formerly incarcerated people. We got a bill passed in Parliament, in the Congress, in the California legislature, that gave more rights of compensation for formerly incarcerated people and sex workers. So our sister group, the English Collective of Prostitutes, also has had some victories recently. There was a brutal crackdown, as people have mentioned, by police against sex workers in Soho, where hundreds of police burst into flats where women worked with riot gear and dogs and evicted the women from their workplaces. The excuse the police gave was they were looking for victims of trafficking. Soho is one of the safest places where women can work, and many of the women were mothers and grandmothers. 20 flats were closed down. This was right before the holidays, and some women ended up working the street just to get money for Christmas. the ECP launched a swift response with the Soho women to oppose the closures, organizing actions, public events, press conferences, marches, and they got a lot of media coverage. They also legally challenged the closures in court, and women testified. They won a lot of support from the local community in Soho, including the vicar, and the 20 flats were reopened. It was a great victory, as some of the women, particularly the immigrant women, had no other option to earn money to feed their kids. And at the same time, not a single victim of trafficking was found. We also organized against proposals to criminalize sex workers' clients. This is on the agenda big time across Europe, everywhere, on the grounds that it would undermine safety. Legislation was introduced in Parliament last November, and it took a massive effort by the English Collective of Prostitutes to defeat it. Similarly, us pros opposed a bill in the California legislature which used trafficking as a justification to arrest the clients of sex workers. We raised that, like the war on drugs in the US and here, anti-trafficking laws are enforced in a racist way against people of color. Who ends up, for example, in New York, in these special trafficking courts that they've created, where people arrested for prostitution are brought in. Most of them are black, and 70% of them are women, and 70% of them are black. We raised how the racism in the anti-trafficking laws is imposed, and in fact, we got the bill gutted in the California legislature, and it didn't get passed. You may have heard that Amnesty International has recently passed a policy supporting decriminalization of sex workers and clients, and calling on states to provide resources to help sex workers leave prostitution if we want. A number of the speakers at the conference have spoken about austerity and the cuts and how they're affecting us. When 1 in 6 people in California are going hungry, when a third of single mothers in California live below the poverty line, when 3 million children in the US live in households earning $2 a day, living on $2 a day, it's no wonder that many women and young people are going into sex work to survive. We are part of the worldwide movement that this conference represents, calling for a living wage for mothers and other caregivers. We want a society without poverty. We want a society that prioritizes the well-being and survival. We want the right to resources. We want the right to resources to raise our own kids and not to be treated as criminals.